Hey, it's Crimson Child from the Crimson Children Collective, and today we're going to be talking about making unique chord stacks in Ableton. Let's get right into the program here. What we're looking at right now is just my template. I haven't started anything, but here's what we're going to make. I don't know what I just listened to because I haven't made it yet, but that's what we're making. So there's a few basic things I want to cover here. First of all, the overall properties of what makes a strong chord stack, the different layers that you need, and then some suggestions for areas where you can get a little creative with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just build our basic chord. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm just going to set up 2 serum channels here, put them at the top of our synth group, and just for reference, there is some processing going on this bus. Here you go if you want to screenshot that. It's just part of my template. I might do a video on the future about my template more specifically, but for now, this is it. Let's do it in F minor because we're going to be basic. And we have an F note there. Let's just make a basic chord. Maybe add a 7th. A 9th. That actually sounds pretty good, just like that. I'm not super into chord theory, so I don't know exactly what we just did, but I do most of my chords like that, and it sounds pretty good. So I'm just going to grab that chord down here. This is going to be our bass. Just for reference, there is also processing on this group, and most importantly, a high pass at the end. So don't be confused if you can hear there's no low end on this. Just going to bring this down a few octaves. Let's go one more, and then we're going to take that and put that same note on our sub as well. So my kind of process for writing or building a chord stack comes from these core 4 layers that obviously I'm not leaving them just like this or else it would sound pretty bad. This needs to be up an octave. Still sounds pretty bad. But these are the first 4 core layers, and then you can add more layers in there as well to make things more unique. So we're gonna start, let's go bottom up. I'll talk about my sub first. I'm actually not really touching it here. That's because I already have it set up on my template. But here, I'll just open up the rack in case you want to see what's going on. Pretty basic sub here. We just have sine wave, square wave, band pass, and then OTTs, saturator, mastering, compressor, and making it mono, and then just a kilohertz limiter. And it's just like a really clean sounding sub. This low pass at the end, and what's really cool about it is because of all this compression and saturation, you can just bring this up if you want more or less harmonics. So sometimes I like just the sine wave like down here. We'll leave it how it was here. We might want to bring down a second harmonic like that, but that's the basics for the sub, not very complicated. For the mid bass, you actually have 2 good options. I'll show you both of them. And we'll swap between the 2. Let's actually duplicate it so I can swap between the 2 and show you how they both sound in context. The first one, I'm just going to use this preset that I've made, but it's really simple to make for yourself. It's basically 2 saw waves, detuned apart, lower end. One of them is an octave up, low pass filter with just some hyper and chorus. And this is basically what people call like a future res or a respace. And then you can just move this cutoff filter up to add movement. But nothing really complicated going on here. Pretty simple actually. But it sounds really good in the context, as you'll see. I like to usually dip down on these second fundamentals too. These can make you lose that core and also make the sound feel a little bit boxy. That usually feels better. And in the intros and stuff, I usually will put like a high shelf on here as well. But here, all of these areas of the frequency range are going to get mixed in with our chords anyways, so I'm not super worried about that. The second option that we have here, and again I'll swap between them once we're in context, is just a simple square wave, which you might think, yeah, Shar, you might want like more stuff in there. Why just a square wave? That's not going to be enough. And it doesn't sound very good on its own, but trust me, in context, it will sound really good. So let's go on to the meat and potatoes, our actual chord stacks. You might be thinking, well, just 2 duplicated saw waves aren't going to work. I'll show you what I usually do. So one of these are going to be the lower or mid-range kind of layer, and the other one's going to be a higher layer. So basically, both of them are going to have the same basic process of 2 saw waves detuned apart. So this is what it sounds like right now, and I'll bring it an octave lower. Just like that. You want to bring the attack up a little bit so there's no click. And then on this one, make sure we turn on the master. You basically want a band pass on the low end, just to do a little bit of high cut and really isolate that range. Some things here, like the amount of resonance or exactly where you're positioning the bandpass, is up to you. I'm just showing you the basic structure of how you can make these chord stacks sound really thick. It's not so much about each individual layer, just how they're all going to sound like together at the end. So we have this in the mid lows a little bit there. I'm going to put on chorus to make it a little bit wider. You don't want too much, just a little bit of subtle chorus. And here's one of the areas that I'll preface by saying you don't have to do this, but this is one of the things that I do to make my chord stacks sound more unique. So that's actually a reverb filter. So most people use this on basses and stuff to get that kind of that nasty sounding hybrid trap bass, but I've been experimenting with using it on chords at low cutoffs. And then turning down the mix, something like that, and it actually sounds quite good. In the context, it just gives us this really tinny, interesting feel, and then you can just mess with how much mix you want there. But that's the basics of that one. The second layer, it'll start out pretty similar. We'll do that same thing, except this time we're going to go an octave up on the second one. Usually on this one I do a little bit more detune than the other one, just because the higher something is, the more you can afford to like really mess with it and like destroy the sound. So that's the first step of that, a little bit more detune than usual. And then here, instead of a band pass, we're just going to do a high pass. This sounds pretty bad on its own, but once you mix it together, you'll realize that this kind of range fills up the other one a lot better. Let's mess with this more and give it more movement first before going to that step. So the first thing I'm going to do, add that chorus again. And you might be asking why I don't just copy the other patch on here before doing these steps. It's because I want it to sound slightly different. So like with this reverb, reverb filter, I'm gonna move it to like a different kind of range so that we get slightly different timbre than that one. And again, this one you can be a little bit heavier with that. And then one thing I really like doing, again, not essential, but I really like it, is mapping an LFO to our global master tune and adding a little bit of vibrato up and down. So this one you only really want like one or two. I usually like it slower. It just gives it that really warbly feeling. It gives it a lot of movement. So this one is sounding quite resonant right now. The middle one, let's turn that resonance. So those are the basics of our chord stacks. There's a lot more you can do in terms of adding more interesting filters with serum effects, with messing around with different filters, different cutoff positions for these. I like adding a noise oscillator too. I almost forgot that to this one, just to give it a little bit of shine in the high end. So now let's start adding in those other layers that we have. That sub underneath everything. So you can see how quickly this just fills up our whole range just because of how we've EQ'd, and not even EQ'd, but set our instruments to occupy different frequency ranges. You can even try OTTing your higher one. I like doing, again, this is a preface saying that this is not something you have to do, but something I like to do. I like over distorting the higher one a little bit, so I'll use this plugin called NC17, which I love to bits, to really crunch it up. Make sure you're EQing after distortion and compression because you're adding a lot of low end there. So you can see how extremely we can high pass this, and if you listen to it on its own, it'll sound bad. That sounds really piercing and annoying, but in the context, it works. And then it's just a lot of basic leveling. Like, we haven't talked about this guy here. Let's go in and make that a little less resonant. We could maybe move up the cutoff position of this. That sounds pretty good. Now let's try putting in that square wave instead. Make sure we high pass it. Actually, I usually run this through the subgroup because it gets too loud. Something like that. Is this still too high? No, this is good. So this works in some cases. Some cases that other respace works better. But it just mixes in nicely. In this case, I'm going to use this one. I really like that width and that grip. But yeah, you can hear that in context here, how everything just comes and glues together. This is some really minimal time spent post-processing, just that basic idea, getting it down. But there's a lot more you can do with this. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I'll have some example songs after this linked in the description, maybe, of songs where I've done this or songs I've heard this before, the same process. It doesn't sound that amazing, but when you put it in the context all together, each of those layers really come together to make a really big chord stack. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful for you guys. My name is Crimson Child. This was a video from the Crimson Children Collective. If you guys are interested in joining our Facebook group, there will be a link in the description. We're small but growing. If you want to join a great producer community of people helping each other out and giving advice and just being homies in general, there's a link to that. We'll be opening up our Discord soon. So if you want to check out all those things, links will be in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.